Okay, let's unpack this. We are diving into a major crisis unfolding. It's happening right now, centered around Cairo.
Yes, a very high-stakes diplomatic situation, and it's incredibly confidential.
We're specifically focused on this agreement from September 2025, signed by Iran's Foreign Minister, Iraqi, and the IAEA Director General, Rafael Grossi.
Right, and this agreement is the ultimate black box. It's sealed. Known primarily, maybe only, to Iran's Supreme National Security Council, the SNSC.
So the big question, the one our research keeps pointing to, is really existential for Tehran, isn't it?
It absolutely is. Are they being forced into compliance, having to accept things they really don't want to, what they might even call drinking atomic poison internally?
Or is this secrecy just a desperate attempt to, delay the inevitable, maybe total collapse?
That's the core of it, and the urgency comes down to this ticking clock.
Exactly. This mechanism set to activate in, roughly 10 days, known as mechanism Imache, the snapback. But, to really get why this is such a moment of reckoning, we have to rewind, go back 10 years.
Yeah, back to the original 2015 nuclear deal, the JCPOA.
Or the Barjam, as it's known in Iran.
We absolutely have to start there, because there's a real paradox in 2015. You have to ask, why did the regime sign the Barjam then? They were, arguably, at their absolute peak power, economically, regionally. It seems completely counterintuitive.
Well, when you look at the economic numbers from back then, their strength was, it was stunning.
It really was.
Oil was trading incredibly high. What was it, nearly $148 a barrel?
Right around there, and production was up near 4.2 million barrels a day.
Some analysts figured their total oil income over the years just before that was somewhere between $800 billion and maybe even $1 trillion.
A massive amount. And that's not even counting the immediate cash infusion.
Ah, yes, the $150 billion, freed up by President Obama.
Physically flown on aircraft to Kuwait, then on to Iran. I mean, it was a moment of just overwhelming economic strength for them.
And regionally, they seemed untouchable.
Completely. Assad in Syria was basically taking orders. Hezbollah had Lebanon's parliament tied in knots, couldn't even form a government.
The Houthis had just overthrown the government in Yemen.
And Iraq, under Maliki, it was, effectively a playground for the Revolutionary Guards, for the Quds force.
Yeah, I remember the boasting regime figures openly claiming they controlled, 5 Arab capitals?
Exactly. And you had President Rouhani making that infamous statement, something like, "No one in this region can even drink a glass of water without our supervision." Pure dominance projection.
Okay, so they're boasting about controlling 5 capitals, massive oil wealth. Yet, they come to the table for the Barjam. Why?
That's the paradox we mentioned, because despite all that apparent strength, the money, the regional proxies, they were being squeezed.
By what specifically?
By those 6 specific UN Security Council sanctions, the ones embedded in Resolution 2231. Those weren't just symbolic. They were genuinely choking the regime's ability to operate on the world stage. Even with all the cash, they needed access.
So that enormous power projection was actually quite brittle when faced with targeted international legal pressure.
Precisely. They realized they couldn't function properly under those specific sanctions. It forced their hand.
Which brings us right back to the snapback mechanism, a mechanism born out of, distrust.
Absolutely. It was bolted onto the main deal because, quite frankly, the world powers just didn't trust the regime to keep its word. Full stop.
Even though the Obama administration was pushing hard for companies to go back in.
Despite major lobbying efforts, you had John Kerry personally encouraging big names, Total, Volvo, Siemens, to invest again. But the underlying suspicion remained.
And it seems like that suspicion was well-founded. Our research really highlights one consistent voice warning against trust.
The organized Iranian resistance, yes. For decades, they were the ones exposing secret nuclear sites, warning the international community, providing documented evidence.
And that constant pressure, that documented history of deception they exposed, influenced the demand for snapback.
It certainly played a major role in convincing negotiators that a safety net was essential. You have to understand the regime's own doctrine here. Damn. Exactly. Strategic deception as a core principle. Even Khamenei's fatwa saying WMDs are forbidden. Well, many diplomats saw it as just that, Tikia, a smokescreen.
Which is why they needed something automatic, something undeniable.
Precisely. That's what the snapback is. It's a tripwire. If the IAEA verifies Iran has violated the nuclear limits, boom.
All 6 of those original UN Security Council sanctions from Resolution 2231 snap right back into place.
Instantly. And crucially, without any single country like Russia or China being able to veto it.
That automaticity, that lack of a veto,
Yeah.
that must be terrifying for Tehran.
It fundamentally changes the game.
Okay, so let's fast forward back to today, 2025. We're moving from that 2015 peak power
To a situation of, well, deadly deadlock, profound isolation.
The government seems much weaker now, right? Especially after that implied defeat in the recent 12-day war with Israel.
Oh, definitely. Military setbacks always expose and deepen internal fractures. And look at their regional assets.
The ones they used to brag about.
They're crumbling. Iraq's new leader, Soudani, is focused inward. He's signing deals with the U.S., with Saudi Arabia. He's basically told Tehran to back off.
And Syria, Hezbollah.
Both are in deep trouble. Financially drained, militarily weakened, much less reliable as proxies.
And you can see the internal stress reflected in how they're handling this Cairo agreement.
Absolutely. Look at Foreign Minister Iraqi. He's clearly terrified of ending up like Zarif, his predecessor.
Who got blamed when deals went bad. Called a CIA agent.
Exactly. So in Iraqi's recent interview about the Grossi meeting, get this, he mentioned the Supreme National Security Council, the SNSC, 19 separate times.
19 times. Wow.
He was building a legal and political firewall, screaming, "Don't blame me. This was a collective decision by the top body."
That screams desperation. It confirms they feel like they're on a downhill slide.
They are, and now they're facing the return of sanctions they couldn't even handle when they were strong.
Compounded by what? 4 major national uprisings since 2017?
Yes. The domestic situation is incredibly volatile. This isn't 2015 anymore, not by a long shot.
Okay, let's talk about that economic hammer. The regime always boasted about having a PhD in sanctions circumvention. Why won't that work this time?
Because UN sanctions are a totally different beast. US sanctions, EU sanctions. Yeah, maybe you can find ways around them. Shell companies, smuggling, complex routes.
But UN sanctions.
They're global, backed by literally 193 countries. Circumvention becomes practically impossible. No major government is going to risk UN penalties just to trade with Iran right now. That PhD is useless here.
So if they can't bypass them, what's the immediate, most crippling effect?
Finance. Straight away, Iran gets cut off from the global SWIFT banking system.
Which means
all legitimate international banking stops. Forget trying to sell oil. How would anyone even pay them legally? You can't wire money.
And oil is still their main source of income, right? Even now.
It's their lifeline.
Yeah.
But under UN snapback, nobody will touch their oil legally.
We heard reports they recently dumped stored oil cheaply.
Yes, around 15 million barrels sold off to China at half price. Why? Because they knew that once snapback hits, that oil becomes toxic. No one, not even China or India, will risk global isolation for that relatively small amount of oil. It's just not worth the diplomatic fallout.
And what about the smuggling, the flags of convenience they used? Panama, Venezuela.
That gets shut down too. The UN sanctions regime allows for monitoring and control of all imports and exports. Those old tricks of reflagging ships to hide cargo origin won't work when global ports are enforcing UN mandates. The loopholes just slam shut.
So let's connect this back to the listener. What does all this mean for ordinary people inside Iran? The economic impact on the street?
It's immediate and brutal. Think massive overnight inflation.
Prices for dollars.
Yeah.
Gold.
Skyrocketing. Basic goods, food, medicine, everything will surge in price. And remember, the population is already dealing with severe shortages. Water, bread, electricity. It's dire.
So this isn't just an economic inconvenience,
It's potentially catastrophic for daily life. It pours fuel on an already smoldering fire of public discontent, an explosive mix.
Okay, this desperation, this economic cliff edge,
Yeah.
it leads to the final demands,
Yeah.
the line in the sand.
Exactly. The things they're being forced to accept are things that fundamentally gut their entire power structure. There are 3 main ones.
Let's take them one by one. First, the nuclear program itself.
Total dismantling. No enrichment allowed. Period. End of story. It's not just a technical limit, it's an ideological surrender for them.
I remember Trump saying they shouldn't even be allowed to say the word enrichment.
That's the level of restriction being demanded. Zero tolerance.
Okay, second demand. It hits their missile program, the thing they always called their untouchable red line.
Right. It gets dismantled, too, at least the long-range capability. Ballistic missiles capped at a maximum range of 300 miles.
For 485 kilometers. That seems specific.
It's very specific. It's designed explicitly so their missiles cannot reach Israel or European capitals. It's a direct answer to past threats they made against London, Paris, Berlin. Takes that threat off the table.
And the third demand, their regional influence.
Gone. Total stop to all support for proxy forces. Hezbollah, the Houthis, militias in Iraq and Syria, cut off completely.
Taken together, those three demands.
They basically forced the regime to abandon its entire geopolitical strategy of the last 4 decades. Aggression, extortion, proxy warfare, it all stops.
Now, things got really tense recently. We heard reports the parliament, the Majlis, was temporarily shut down. Why?
Because some hardliners in the Majlis made an incredibly dangerous threat. They basically said if snapback happens, Iran will leave the NPT.
The Nuclear Non-Proliferation Treaty.
Yes, and pulling out of the NPT is, well, it's the nuclear suicide option.
Why? What happens if they leave the NPT?
It automatically triggers the ultimate UN sanction. Placement under Chapter 7, Article 42 of the UN Charter.
Which means?
It officially designates Iran as a threat to international peace. And critically, under Article 42, any nation can then take military action against Iran without needing a new UN Security Council resolution. No veto possible.
So threatening to leave the NPT is actually inviting potential military strikes.
Pretty much. It removes the last diplomatic shield.
So the regime's final card threatening war, it's basically empty. Can they even fight a major conflict?
The recent clashes suggest no. Not effectively. Their air defenses are weak, their command structure took hits, they couldn't get advanced systems like the S-300 from Russia.
So Khamenei threatening war is just bluster at this point.
It seems that way. The leverage isn't really there.
So when you look at the whole picture, the biggest threat to the regime isn't actually external military force.
No. Our analysis, and reportedly Khamenei's own assessment, points inward. The main threat is domestic. It's the people, the uprising.
That's the ultimate vulnerability then.
Absolutely. The economic disaster from snapback is almost guaranteed to pour gasoline on that fire. You've got a population that's already gone through 4 massive national protests since 2017. They're angry, they're organized in ways they weren't before.
And you see the regime's fear of this internal threat.
Right.
In their actions.
You see it starkly in the execution numbers. Over 800 people executed in just the first 6 months of this year. That's a horrifying record.
It's a sign of
terror. Pure terror of their own population, of the internal uprisings, of these resistance units operating on the streets. They're trying to rule by fear because they're losing control.
Which makes the situation even more unstable.
Extremely. Every minute feels critical. Any small spark in arrest over the hijab laws, some local incident could ignite a nationwide firestorm, just like what happened with Gina Amini's death.
So the regime is walking a tightrope, complying just enough to avoid snapback, but not so much that it triggers internal collapse or looks weak.
Exactly, and they might be trying to avoid the internal explosion more than anything else right now.
Okay, let's try to bring this all together. This whole decades-long nuclear crisis, the threat it posed, it's now facing this global enforcement mechanism, the snapback.
A mechanism that arguably only exists because of the relentless, documented efforts of non-governmental groups, primarily the Iranian resistance.
They exposed the secrets. They built the case for international action over decades.
Yes, the evidence really suggests snapback was ultimately included because the world was forced to confront the regime's history of deception, a history brought into the light consistently by these outside actors. They created the leverage that made snapback possible.
It's quite something. So here's a final thought for you, our listener, to consider. The scale of what was averted.
Yeah, think about it. If this bomb program hadn't been exposed piece by painful piece by regime opponents over the years,
the world could literally be facing the most destructive weapon
in the hands of arguably the most dangerous, destabilizing government in modern history. That's the catastrophe the world seems to have dodged, largely thanks to pressure from outside the halls of power.
So the final question is, given that success, that non-governmental pressure proves so critical, what responsibility does that place on the international community now? As this snapback deadline looms and the Iranian people face this guaranteed economic devastation, what comes